Hello, welcome to Asking for a Friend, our first one of 2022. I think I need to do a quick apology. So obviously, normally we just have a month's rest and we're back in February. But judging by the amount of questions that we have had come in, I definitely should have come back a little bit earlier. So thank you for waiting for this next Asking for a Friend. Asking for a Friend is an initiative started out with Never Not Creative, Young Bloods, Mentally Healthy, but we're pleased to kind of have in our supporters as well, AGDA, Advertising Council of Australia, and more and more other organisations as we go. It exists because we wanted to create a safe place for where you can ask the unaskable. So the questions that you're worried may change the way that people treat you at work or affect the opportunities that you might be given as a result. So we bring together industry leaders, mental health professionals to give non-judgmental responses in a safe, anonymous environment. Before I do introduce our guests, a little bit of housekeeping. So if you're new to Asking for a Friend, on the right-hand side, you'll see a questions tab. So if you do have any questions live for us during the session, you can add them in there. You can also add any thoughts, links, anything that's interesting, feel free to add into the chat as well. If you need more immediate help, please consider getting in touch with any of the resources on the link that I've put into the chat as well. Everything that we do with Never Not Creative and Mentally Healthy is volunteer run, and so essentially it is unofficial. We're a bunch of people using community to come together and tackle the challenges that our industry is facing. So with that in mind, also remember that this is anonymous, so we don't have the context always to your questions, and we'll do the very best we can with what we have, and we'll try and add some assumptions in there just to able to help you understand where the advice and the shared experiences might be coming from. If things are getting very serious for you, you should absolutely seek professional help, whether that's financial, legal, or mental health related. So with all of that out of the way, our first guests of 2022, we have Nicky Bryson. Nicky is principal and co-founder of Sayers Brand Momentum and a highly experienced brand and consumer and cultural strategist. Nicky's helped guide some of Australia's biggest brands, as well as advise governments and startups on impactful and effective brand transformation, marketing strategy, and consumer behavior. Driven by the need to create a cultural shift within organizations, a positive learning environment, and a creative pipeline for young people, Nicky founded The Trenches, an industry-wide free youth mentoring program across media, marketing, creative, technology, and consulting that has facilitated over 1,500 mentoring sessions globally so far. Welcome, Nicky. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Thank you.
Feel free to stick a link to The Trenches in the chat if you like, so people can go check that out as well. And we have Dr. Erica Crome, not her first rodeo, back to Asking for a Friend. Erica is a clinical psychologist and health manager with broad expertise in mental health, sleep, continual improvement, project management, digital health, and insurance. Passionate about developing evidence-based programs to improve mental health at scale by combining best clinical practice with user-centered design. Erica has authored over 20 peer-reviewed publications on mental health and implementation of best practice, regularly develops content for digital health programs, white papers, and awareness campaigns. Currently program director of the National Workplace Alliance. Is that right?
National Workplace Initiative
for the Mental Health
Mentally Healthy
Mission.
Workplace Alliance. Yep.
That's the one. So all over this space. So we're very lucky to have both of you join us today. Thanks again for coming. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have had a lot of questions come in. There's a chance we may not get to some of the ones that come in live. At the end we'll see how we go at the end of the session. And what I'll do is I'll send a link into our Discord channel where, we'll be able to answer some questions maybe over the coming days, should they come in. So without further ado, Nicky, I'm going to come to you with the first question. So being a mum with 2 kids in my 40s, I just graduated Bachelor of Graphic Design while I've worked as a part-time project officer in the public sector for the last 2 years. I wish I can use my uni skills in comms design more in my job. If I could earn more money. I'd reach our dream home quicker. I'd love some ideas on how to utilize more of my communication skills at work.
Great. Okay. Firstly, I have had to pick up my son from daycare for a cold. So if you hear screaming behind me or banging on the door, please bear with me. If I have to just
all expected.
I got to say that before. Okay, great. So good question. Firstly, kudos to you for having kids, working part-time, which is never actually part-time with kids, and doing study. So amazing for you to achieve all of that. What I took from a big part of your question was earning more money. And I think that's a critical part of that question, because there's kind of two ways that you can go about this. The first way is everyone always says, lean into your current role and try and find opportunities to show off your skill set, that in the hopes that then you can be promoted or change roles. That is definitely a course, but often that just ends up in people doing more for free. And so not knowing your role, but seeing that it's in the public sector, and that the public sector is often hard to innovate and inflexible as it is, and not knowing if you work in a comms role. So if you work in a role that you can see there's an opportunity to advance and be paid for it with your new skills, by all means, put your hand up, show your work, keep trying to get to that job there. If it's not that clear, I probably wouldn't waste too much time doing free work at your work in the pursuit of that. I think they'll just exhaust your skills, and you'll just become that PowerPoint person that does free stuff that's really good at design. I would actually, if you want to, I would work on your book. And so there's amazing volunteer places which you could find something that you're passionate about, get some amazing work on your book, seek a better job, or seek a job that's specific to you. Or alternatively, if you're in pursuit of money now, there's a lot of freelance work out. COVID's had a huge impact on freelance market here. And I would look to, obviously you've already got a full-time job, but what you can to get your skills going in a commercial sense, so that then you have a book that then you can take to getting that next role. But I wouldn't work too much for free or lean in to your business if it's not going to have a clear payoff.
Excellent. Erica, anything to add? Public sector?
Oh, I was just about to say, Nicky, I think you nailed it. Anything that I would have said, you've brought up, which I think is, first step, job crafting within your job, but really being realistic about whether that's going to pay off, and then if not, looking at what's next.
Yeah, great. Okay, well, let's move on. So Erica, going to come back to you. Since university, completing a graphic design degree, I've barely kept my head above water. It's been 9 years. Should I pack it in? I feel like I'm ruined by hesitation, surpassed by technology, and hustling for loose change. I did forget to say at the beginning, like we all looked at these questions beforehand, and there is a lot of tiredness and disillusion out there. Understandably, we've had a pandemic, still got it. We've just talked about ourselves around how was 2020 and 2021 a thing, or is this just like this period of time that we've been trapped in? We've now got wars and floods, and it's understandable that I think people are feeling a little bit disillusioned. So I guess we're sort of very aware of that context. So let's, if you want to sort of carry on from there, Erica.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Andy. And I think, this one sounds tough and exhausting, and it sounds like it's even longer than the COVID fatigue that we've all been experiencing as well. So I think here's where I'm going to be a really frustrating psychologist, and we never give that direct advice that you're looking for, because I think in order to make a decision like this, you need to be really comfortable with how you've landed on it as well. So I think first up, acknowledge this is a tough decision, because if it wasn't, you would have made it already. So there's obviously parts of the job that you love, but there's also parts of the job that are really stressful or really frustrating for you. So I think to help make some of those big decisions, it's really important to try a couple of things. So firstly, just stepping back and looking at what you want out of your life as a whole, and really looking at whether you're on the track to get there. So I think sometimes we get so focused on small little things that we forget that really big picture about what makes us really happy, what's consistent with our values, and whether we're on track to do that. So I think anytime you're feeling this frustration or just something's not clicking, it's often a good sign that you're not working consistently with your values, and there is a benefit of a change, whatever that change is. I think on a bit more of a practical level, sketching out the pros and cons of both staying where you are and a change is really helpful. So I think really looking at what you get from being where you are, what it's costing you, and also what you get for leaving and what that's going to cost you. I think really looking at things that you love about this kind of career, it might be that there's elements around creativity or innovation that you can take easily to somewhere else as well, where you're feeling it's kind of clicking a bit better. And I think it's also important that, you reach out within your networks, and maybe you go to the trenches, but just chat through around whether your expectations are being realistic as well. Because I think sometimes we can get really frustrated about where we're at in our career if we're kind of putting too much of a load on ourselves, or we're expecting too much of ourselves at any one point. So I think this is a good one to bounce around with people that you know, that you trust, who'll challenge you, but also support you as well. So Nicky, anything else?
That was good. I learned a lot. No, I think it's just also it's hard, and it's acknowledging the industry's changing. So you've obviously been in it for 9 years, and as you've mentioned, it's becoming commoditized, and technology and platforms and production technology that just kind of cuts through that. I think the only thing is two things to add. I guess we have multiple careers in our life, so if you are scared, it's okay, because actually if you look at it, a lot of people have 3 or 4 careers, so it's okay to decide that you have some other interest and you want to pursue that completely. Otherwise, not knowing where you work, I would, if you want to keep in design but find a place that you feel more comfortable or secure in your job, maybe look at in-house client agencies or client side, because they still have a lot of the need. They're actually taking a lot of that need in-house because it's more efficient and effective and for them. So maybe it's looking at a different lens of the industry in terms of where you're hireable and where it's going to be most rewarding.
Yeah, that's excellent. The other thing I've noticed just in the last year especially is with everyone being so isolated and working from home, there's a lot of things that you sort of like, there's a lot of negative self-talk, stuff that you're telling yourself, like, I'm behind and, I'm hesitating. And there's actually a few more questions coming up about that it's worth. And I think you mentioned about like chatting with other people. It's worth just talking with other people to get the truth for yourself. Like you'll probably find that everybody else is feeling the same thing. And, it might not actually be true for you. And there's things that you're doing that are great. So always good to try and find the truth rather than just the stuff that you keep telling yourself. Okay. Nicky, this is a great one for our industry. So I absolutely loathe and dread self-promotion and networking. Is there a way to do this and preserve your soul? I find the manufacture of promotion daunting and distasteful. Alcohol was my go-to for many years in an industry with a drink problem until I gave it up. To me, self-promotion rings false. I'm a person, not a brand. It's like an unsolicited sales call, somewhere between desperate and cocksure. I don't trust people with complete confidence, as in creativity, if you don't have a degree of uncertainty. How can you be hungry if you're not bricking it? I actually edited this down. There was a whole big piece around this, but we are in this like balancing act, aren't we? Of like, you've got to put yourself out there, but you don't want to look overconfident and cocky. So how do we tackle this?
I love you and this question, firstly, because I feel like it resonates with so many people. And I think it's this thing where, because we're in this creative marketing industry, we're supposed to be good at doing that for ourselves, which actually most people aren't at all. I think, again, like you said before, any perspective on it from people who've been living on screen for 2 years, you'll probably see actually the same 20 to 30 people on everything. So actually in our industry, there's about 20 to 30 really good network profile people that seem to be on every trade press panel award, and they often have PR support teams behind them. So it seems to be this effortless thing that people can just pick up thought leadership or speak on panels or present themselves, but it's actually quite difficult. I think in saying that, trade press and events look for new people. So you are desired and wanted. And I think sometimes the hurdle for this stuff is no one wants to hear from me or talk to me. And like you said, if I'm not confident, I love that point, because I think that's an interesting point for you anyway, when you say I'm a person, not a brand. I guess the first thing though would be like, why do you want to have a profile and network? Is it something that you want to achieve from a goal? Is it your employer who says you need to have profile to get X? Is there something, an outcome that you want that you can then drive towards? Because that's quite, that will help you to work out what you actually want out of it. The second thing I think is doing exactly as you are. Don't become a performative wanker, and don't do the I'm confident and I, do keynote speeches and I know everything I'm talking about. I think the world is now hungry for that uncertain, honest perspective. And I think that's really interesting. And if you actually look on LinkedIn and stuff, the comments that get the most likes and shares are people who are being really honest about things and sharing learnings and stuff. Not that you have to do that on LinkedIn. The other thing I would say is actually think of networking as like a thing. So I don't like big events. I'm like you. I've hidden in cocktail parties for networking in the bathroom with champagne because I just can't dread going out and dealing
Just
with.
got to check my phone in the corner.
Yeah, I've
Love
literally
doing
like
that one.
taken my drink to the toilet and sat there till the cocktail section was over, and in conferences because it's horrible. But what you could do and what I sometimes do is just find interesting people. And I think this is how Andy we got in touch. You find interesting people who you've heard about, who you'd like to talk to and ask if they want to have a coffee. And actually the best networking is word of mouth and recommendations. And usually that person will then send you on a coffee with someone else. And that tends to be the most rewarding. Otherwise, find something you're super passionate about or interested in, and that can be what you talk about. So like what Andy's created here, you can create something or a point of view that is something that's really true to you. And then you won't feel like fraud, but you can get noticed for something that makes sense for you. Or ask people to promote you, because that's also really helpful. So just ask someone else to promote you.
I love that networking thing. Like whenever anyone says networking, it's basically you assume a room full of people and you've got to go and talk to strangers. Whereas it doesn't have to be. It can be one-on-one coffees. Like that's great, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Erica,
And I think, jumping in, that's my first thought. So I firstly want to call out, like, great job on stepping back from the alcohol as a way of getting through it. I think that's a really good thing on so many levels. But yeah, like I think a lot of us, when we think about networking, think, massive 80s shoulder pads and just, business cards left, right and center and really firm handshakes. And that kind of networking is quite soul destroying. It is, it's really uncomfortable. So I think, Nicky, my advice is really similar to yours, which is like, if you aim for this really authentic network, what you're doing is building a range of really interesting people around you with similar ideas. And networking isn't always self-promotion. Often if you amplify other people's work or share a new way of doing things or an article that other people are going to really enjoy, you add value to them and they want to keep engaged with you. So I think, if it's an area you're good at or you're interested in, ask questions, express interest, congratulate people on their work. And yeah, keep it small because you've still got to manage that network as well. There's nothing worse than people feeling it's been very transactional and you've used them for something and then you've moved on. So I think maybe it's a quality over quantity for a really good network.
Yeah, great. That's good. I think we've all just had networking readjusted in our minds now. That's good. There'll be a lot more reaching out happening today. Erica, how do you manage a full-time job, part-time study, and having a life? I feel like you probably have had to manage this.
I saw that one come through and I know I went, me first, Andy, on this one. I had a giggle because I remember being pregnant with our second and going to some of the leading child and family psychologists to go, how on earth do you make this work? So I was studying my master's in health management at the time and was working as well. So their advice was free sandwiches for lunch boxes, drop the standard on housework massively, and just, be really brutal about quality and not quantity. So I think hopefully kind of me implementing it is the same advice I'd give other people as well. But I think, first of all, I'd say, I hear you. I've been there and it's tough. It's hard work and it's worth it when you kind of put the hard yards in. But let's be realistic. It's going to be really hard to do everything to the standard that you'd love all the time. So I think first up, be brutal about your priorities. Be really clear on what you're ready to drop. So I think, Nicky, you're a good example. You're not going to leave a sick kid at daycare. The first thing you drop, is having noise in the background on a webinar. I think also just really work towards good enough as well. So this is not a time for perfectionism in marks, in study, in who you are as a parent or what you're doing at work. This is around really being clear on what acceptable is and then working towards that as well. So, it's very comforting to know that there's a lot of research to say that good enough for things like parenting is actually better for resilient kids than perfect parenting. But I think it goes the same for anything else you're doing in life as well. So I think really also put boundaries around different activities as well. If you're spending quality time away from work, away from study, put your phone down, don't be scrolling, like be present, really enjoy that. So really try and time box activities as much as you can. So when you're present in one of them, you're fully present. I think make time to look after yourself. I know it's something we say all the time, so it's almost lost its value, but this is a hard slog. You need your energy, you need your health. those little moments where you go out and look after yourself, whether it's exercise, a coffee with a friend, something nice for yourself once in a while, actually really work, and they're really important. I think give up on unhelpful guilt. You're going to drop the ball sometimes. Beating yourself up isn't going to make it any better. It's just going to slow you down. And I think really it takes a village to do a lot of these things. So reach out for help and accept help as well. I think if you're a high performer, which, if you're wanting career, study, and a life, chances are you are kind of in that bucket. Sometimes it can be really hard to ask for help. It could be as simple as asking friends to come your way for a coffee because you just don't have time to travel. It could be asking friends to, help out every once in a while, but really kind of extend those feelers when you need to as well. But Nicky, it sounds like you're in the same boat as well.
Yeah, the mother's guilt, the employer's guilt. That was amazing. I'm only going to add some readings. There's a really good TED talk called Thrive by 5, which is by the Mindero group. And that's really great to watch in terms of being present, particularly with kids. And I'm reading this book at the moment called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, which I recommend reading because it's amazing, and it's how we have lost our ability to pay attention or focus on things. And there's a lot in there around your challenge around time boxing, being present, trying to manage your time so that you can actually achieve your tasks. So I'm really enjoying it, but for the same reason that you're needing it. So I can put these things in the chat as well.
Cool. Johann Hari, my favorite book on mental health, Lost Connections. Haven't read this new one yet, but yeah. Great. Okay. So, Nicky, I mean, if this isn't the epitome of our industry, this next question, I think, well, there probably is another one coming. Yesterday, I worked until 2 a.m. My friend asked if I'd be putting that on my timesheet, and I said I wouldn't be. Mostly because I'm embarrassed. I feel like if I was better, I would have finished the job within the regular hours. So by not adding the hours, I feel like my work thinks I'm a good, organized creative. Context, I'm a senior. I know I'm not slow. Everyone likes my work, but I still have this feeling like I have to hide my mediocrity behind excessive hours. Can I claim back some self-worth there, or does everyone do this and it's a good way to stay valuable?
Yeah, I mean, you are one of everyone, firstly. This is actually the model of our industry is broken. So firstly, head hours and time boxed work is actually completely incongruent with creativity. So basically, when you time constrain creativity, everything can become derivative. And what's happened is that people like you and like all of us have just propelled and perpetuated this system where we get more for less, and it's the agencies have perpetuated it and clients. So basically what happens now is the client might ask for, I need this campaign delivered, and then pushes back. Now they want it in 5 weeks, and that over time becomes the norm, and that's what's happened. So things that used to have 3 months to be delivered now have 5 weeks, sometimes 5 days. And so that's the cycle that's happened, where it's now an expectation that you can deliver the same output within less inputs, and it's not just you that does this. The self-worth thing, I think, is you can hopefully try to drop that, because I think we can talk about how you can, but it's definitely not just you. I used to do this all the time. I don't know why we feel like we can't be honest, whether it's because then we're not doing a good enough job, or we look like we're complaining, and there's this really big stigma in agencies about not complaining and just sucking up and doing it. And also there's kind of that bastion of suits who rule, and so it's very hard to push back, because from my experience in agencies, the argument you have most of the time is we don't have enough time, and you just go round and round in circles being like, no, we need more time and our team needs more time, and you end up doing the job at the same amount of time. You've just wasted your energy arguing. So completely understand by that. I think what might be liberating for you is just to try and be honest with your timesheets and see what happens. Just maybe, even if no one notices, at least you're being honest. It might, sometimes when we feel anxious about something, when we, embrace it or just acknowledge it, it frees us from the feeling. It might help the conversation. People might notice, and then you might be able to bring others in and have a more kind of agency-based conversation about the hours. Your partner or your team broadly. I would encourage others to express if they're feeling the same thing. Ultimately, this cycle needs to break, and you're not going to be able to break it on your own. But I feel like little steps help us to have this conversation around that, why it's not working. Alternatively, smart agencies, our company, we don't do head hours anymore, our timesheets. It's all, value-based, output-based work, because it shouldn't be costed around that, and as an asset you're over delivering and the business itself isn't getting its value from you. So otherwise you could look at for places that have a more modern approach to your time and output. But firstly, don't worry about your self-worth, because you sound like you're very good at your job, you're competent, you're amazing. You need them to support you more, not the other way around.
Excellent. Erica, anything to add there?
Yeah, so I put some links in the chat about
Yeah,
just
thanks,
some really good fact sheet workbooks. Got it all wrong, but you get the gist. Some really great exercises to work through some of that negative thinking. I think the thing I'll throw in on top, because I agree with everything you've said, Nicky, is around sleep. So it's not something that we really understand, and I think ever since I've learnt about it, I've never done a 2 a.m. ever again. So I think the thing about sleep is that the more you skip sleep, the less productive, the less creative you become, which means that you can get into a cycle where you're doing longer and longer days because your output is less and less per hour.
Mm-hmm.
And that means you start losing more sleep, and that means you kind of stuck with those even longer days. So I think the magic of sleep around things like mood, creativity, innovation, memory, concentration, it all happens in the last 6 to 8 hours of a really solid sleep cycle. So that's your REM sleep that happens right at the end. When you're actually doing those long nights or short sleep cycles, what you're doing is you're messing with the stuff that actually makes you really creative, like focused, and actually really solid in who you are as well. So your mood's much easier to regulate. You're not feeling as stressed. So I think if you kind of start with that 6 to 8 hours sleep and then work backwards, it's often you end up in a much healthier, more productive and more innovative space than you're doing the other way around. So I think it's, checking in on how realistic your standards are, whether the workload's coming from your expectations or coming from the organization as well. But Nicky, I'm happy to leave that in your camp because you know the industry better than I do.
And I think I've always encouraged be transparent and honest with your timesheets and your hours, like, because the business can't know otherwise. Like, it could hire another person maybe if it knew that you were, struggling with that, or it could start to work with clients to say, hey, you need to give us more time for these types of projects. But if they don't know, they'll just continue making decisions that will perpetuate the situation that you're in. So it's always, I think it's better to do that. And, if your organization doesn't value that, then, maybe there's another one that does. Okay. Next one, Erica, right in your sweet spot. How can you get your manager to take their role in their workers' mental health seriously? I've had a manager that was in complete denial that working late repetitively, having too many tight deadlines, and increasing responsibilities without discussion can cause stress to employees. Particularly in small credit businesses, it's hard to get your boss to acknowledge these issues and take action. What would you suggest?
So I think we spoke about this one. I think we have to acknowledge this is a really tricky one for an individual to manage alone, particularly in a smaller organization. There's a power dynamic of this person being your boss, but there's also a power dynamic of this being a small business. So within small business, there is a bit more dependency on the personalities of individual managers compared to larger organizations as well. It's harder to move teams. It's harder to get support from other senior managers as well. So I think, let's start by calling it out that this is not okay. This is not acceptable behaviors within a workplace. How you manage that with your manager is probably going to be really dependent on why the manager's doing this behavior as well. So I think some people feel that because they had to go through these kind of things as they progress, then everyone else should as well. So I think we definitely see that as part of the culture within law, where it's kind of, this is an expectation, this is an initiation period. Or it could be that your manager is completely overcommitted or having to deliver on really unrealistic deadlines that have been set by them. So they actually have no say in how this stuff gets done. And it's not something that they will be able to solve themselves because those expectations on them will not go away. So I think it's a really hard one because normally I'd say just, have that open conversation with your manager. But reading between the lines on this question, it sounds like you have tried to raise it and you're not really getting anywhere. So I think it would be seeing if there are other people in the organisation that you can chat to and get advice, or, talk to that manager around how work is designed and allocated and timed. But I think one of the things we discussed before is like sometimes it's actually just, if things aren't going to change, it's prioritising your own health and leaving an organization if it is really toxic to work in. I think something that's really interesting that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is regulators and work health. So Safe Work Australia are working on regulations that put psychological health on the same level as physical health. So we're already starting to see some of those work health safety regulators stepping into professional services firms or law firms and issuing improvement notices based on the hours people work or based on the way work is done. And so I think as there's more attention falling on these things within workplaces, it's going to be really interesting to watch what that does with how we do work, what the business models are as well. But I think, Nicky, I might hand over to you to see if there's a more industry-specific approach.
I feel like, firstly, just you don't let your health suffer to the detriment of this job. I've been in that situation where I've let my health suffer and I end up in hospital, and it definitely wasn't worth the outcome for the work in that sense. So as Erica said, if it's a business that's run in a small business by a founder who's very dogmatic in this way and is rigid, and you've tried, put your health first. If it's not going to shift, then see what other solutions are out there for you. So always put your health first and know that it's not just you. I think the other thing is, it's hard in our industry because everyone talks about family first, and we're like a family here, and we take we give free yoga and all that crap. And Andy's put some good standards into the chat. So it's, how do you cut through that to actually find somewhere that lives by their word? You can also employ some standards. You could just champion being the well-being champion within the office. If it's a small business, the founder or manager might not have time, and it obviously isn't in their interests, and set some rules yourself. So no emails after 6, Friday afternoons off, work-based thinking time. Take it, maybe try and take this into your control, because that can also relieve your anxiety if you've got control of it. And if that doesn't work, then I would question your health over the work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I put the mentally healthy minimum standards in there, which we've had agencies sign up to. One of the biggest things that we find about that is, one, they're minimum standards. So they really, in some cases, if you don't live up to those standards, they're actually employment law. So, your founder or manager or whoever it is could even be breaking the law when it comes to that stuff. The other part is that if you start a conversation around those and say, look, the industry is signing up to these, then what it does is it just rationalizes everything and legitimizes it. It doesn't make it a personal conversation. It makes it, look, these are some standards that are in the industry now. And so, what we found is that it just helps people speak up without it getting overly charged and emotional when you're having these conversations. So that may help. And if not, then there's a bunch of agencies that have signed it. Not that they're all perfect and they are minimum standards, but it's a start, and they're starting to take those things seriously. Okay, internships, specialist topic. Okay, this one's horrifying. This stuff's still happening. So here we go. I've been interning at an agency with another creative. We've always respected each other and known our positions would not be permanent or available for both of us long term. I've had multiple years experience in the industry and find myself assisting and guiding most of this recent graduates' jobs and queries. They're very grateful for my help, and we've become good friends. For a few weeks now, some seniors we work with have been making obvious actions that favor my competitor, which is how they refer to us. These include invites to meetings, lunches, gossip, tips to get higher in the agency, and the offer of work, all exclusive to them. What hurts most are the comments praising how amazing my fellow intern is and always assuring them that their job is secure and wanted. Without saying it, they make me feel like I'm doing a worse job. I find myself wanting to leave. My question is, how do I bring this up to these seniors without destroying what little hope of a relationship I might have with them or a position in the company?
Where do I start? Firstly, I'm hoping that you're being paid, but it sounds like you're not being paid for this internship by the way that you've kind of framed that question. So firstly, I really hope that you're being paid. And if you're not, then you are not being paid, in my mind, to deal with this drama and politics. And that is
Oh, we just lost your sound, Nicky. We'll bring Nicky back. Let's just see. Yeah, there's definitely, okay, so I'm just going to jump in for a little bit as Nicky comes back on. But there's definitely some stuff here where, like the idea of competitive really does speak to the culture in that business. I'd suggest that might not be a culture that anyone would want to feel like they would live in for long term. And now I'll pass back to Nicky. Oh no, I won't. That's very odd. Okay, I'll let you maybe restart, shut down. We'll carry on here. So the reason I feel quite comfortable talking about this one as well is that we've actually done quite a bit of work in internships with Never Not Creative. And so, you know, there's some things around this, which is, you know, internships are poorly structured. It also feels like, you know, maybe the seniors here have worked out how to kind of exploit and get the most out of one person over another. Maybe that's sort of, you know, helping their jobs. Just the whole thing, I think, in terms of taking a competitive nature to this, is it's not about building talent, which is really the whole point of internships, being able to help people grow into this market. A lot of people see internships as being able to give back, and this just feels like it's not that case at all. Also, you've got multiple years experience in the industry. You know, that really, this business shouldn't be offering internships from kind of that perspective. It sort of devalues the fact that you've got all that experience. So yes, I would take a look. We can definitely share some resources, and if you want to jump into our Discord channel, which I'll put the link to in a little bit, then, you know, jump in, and we, you know, be a few people in our community that certainly can help with that. Erica, do you want to add anything?
A runner-up prize in this one, because I think, as you said, if there's an issue with this broadly in the industry, again, it's going to be hard to manage at an individual level for this one. I think the slight benefit of the doubt is just, you know, do the seniors know that you're equally interested in opportunities for promotion? I think sometimes we can assume that, you know, people are really aware of our intentions and our ambitions, but maybe that's not as obvious to them. But it sounds like we're actually talking about a broader cultural issue. I think for anyone who's running an agency or an organization, I think this is a really one to watch with caution, because those exclusionary tactics can actually be classified as bullying from time to time, depending on the severity. So I think purposely excluding people can actually be a bit of a risk within the workplace as well, rather than part of an acceptable culture.
Yeah. I think you're back. No? Oh, it sounded like you were for a second. Okay, no worries. We'll keep going. But yeah, I think that is excellent, and I think, yeah, there definitely does feel like actually there's some bullying kind of happening. The other thing is, I think you've got nothing to lose by just asking straight out, hey, how am I doing in my internship? Where can I improve? Because even if this doesn't lead to a position longer term, then at least, like, it's now your opportunity to get the most out of it that you can. So maybe ask to get onto a certain project, a brief, get some time with other people in the agency that, you know, you think you could learn from, take them for a coffee, like whatever you need to do to just, if there's no job at the end of it, just milk it for whatever you can get out of it now. I think that's definitely worth doing. Okay, Erica, you're next anyway, so let's carry on. How can you best deal with an overly ambitious employee who keeps trying to steal everyone's limelight? Anytime a member of the design team is recognized for their work, this guy tries to either one-up them by inserting himself into their work or by making snide comments. It's hard to broach the problem with the studio owner without sounding petty.
Am I here?
You are.
Yeah, Nicky.
Sorry, I'll let you answer the question.
Well, I think that if you're noticing these behaviours, my guess is that other people are, and it sounds like some of these behaviours are really starting to impact that sense of psychological safety, which is where people feel that they can share ideas, they can take a few risks around people, they can talk about things that they're not sure of as well. So if you've got someone like this in your team, it's actually going to be really harming the team's ability to produce good work, to innovate, to try new things as well. So I think my advice here depends on your role to this person. So if you're their manager, I would definitely point it out. This is an area of professional development for them. It's going to be really hard for this person to develop good relationships throughout their career if they're engaging in these kind of behaviours. And they might not be aware. It might be coming from overconfidence, or it might be coming from underconfidence. But I think, you know, this is something I'd call out as a manager for that person. If they're a peer, you know, it really depends on whether you feel comfortable raising it doesn't sound like this is a person who might necessarily be open to receiving some of this feedback if this is how they're behaving in the group. But I actually challenge the idea that the studio owner would find this really petty if there's a behavior that's making whole teams uncomfortable. I know I would want to know about it quickly, because then I can do something about it with that person one-on-one. I'd rather be picking up those things and acting on them quickly than having whole teams leave because they're really unhappy with the environment they're in. So I think there's a few things you can do to make that conversation more productive, whether it's, whoever it's with. But I think really focusing on examples of behavior. So make it really tangible, and then talking about the impact that those behaviors had. So don't make it about that person. Make it really objective about what they're doing and then what the consequences of those are. So, Nicky, good to have you back.
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I think these people suck and they drain you, and they are always in creative work environments. I think that was amazing advice, Erica. I think the only other thing would be is how do you and your team, who obviously talk about this, assist each other? So in a women's equality point of view, this is known as gender deafness, often where women talk in meetings and men don't hear them, and how women get around that, or in this situation broadly now, is that they have assists. So if Erica said something and Andy didn't hear her, or just didn't listen, or didn't get the credit she deserved, I would step in and say, Erica, that's a great comment from you. So it's actually kind of a united front against this person, where you support each other to prop each other up and get the right credit, because as you said, it's really hard to be like, no, I did that, because it feels really petty. So I would try to help assisting each other in a way to make sure that your voices are heard equally, on top of the probably better advice that Erica had.
No, that's excellent. I think
Yeah,
I was
that
going
was
to say
great,
as well, like
Nicky.
that. Yeah, that when it's an individual, like, it is easy to talk about this with others. And also, we have things in businesses now like Slack or Teams or whatever, and you can guarantee that there'll be groups of people talking about that person in private channels on those. And so, yeah, bringing it out and supporting each other, and then raising it with the studio owner, like you said, Erica, like, they won't think it's petty if it's destroying their culture. And then people start leaving. So yeah, amazing, awesome advice. This next question is a little bit, I guess it's a little bit similar to the one that we had earlier about sort of self-promotion stuff. But how do you get jobs in the freelance world when you're an introvert and marketing or putting yourself out there isn't your vibe and brings a lot of stress and anxiety? So Nicky, do you want to go first, mate?
Yeah, sure. This is hard, but I think the market is in your favor. So there is huge demand for contracting and freelance work at the moment. Australia is behind in that, and the US and the UK have a lot more freelancers and a sophisticated market around that. But COVID has done you a favor, and there's huge demand for that service. A few ways. One is word of mouth and recommendations, but that can snowball. So like, get a few good jobs and then you get recommended, and it becomes an easier process, but that can take time. Check out MASH. I was recommended that as like a freelance Tinder, but without obviously the connotations that Tinder has, which is basically a marketplace for creative freelancers and then clients. So they'll match you with clients and jobs doing the hard work for you. So check out that MASH. The other thing would be is to find complementary skills and get them to bring you into jobs. So if you are a creative, find freelance planners or strategists or account people, because they will be working on jobs themselves and they'll need your skills. And so if you can attach yourself to a few indies or small shops, or just lone wolf strategy people or account people or consultants, then they're likely to be able to need you and bring you in, and they can basically do your pitching for you, and then you can come in to do the project to assist them. Alternately, there's a lot of CCOs and creative people who've left to start their own shop or their own business, so you can also reach out to them or find them, and again, they can bring you onto jobs to help them deliver it. So find people that can do that hustle for you, I guess.
Excellent. Erica, anything on the stress and anxiety part of this?
Yeah, so I think I've put the resources in the chat, and I'll put another one in the chat too. I think part of what I think is really important to challenge is this internal narrative about not being able to do it and this not being your vibe. So I think the more you focus on that, the more challenging that whole activity is going to be. So I think either working through some of the resources I'll put in the chat, or speaking to someone professionally just around challenging some of those negative self-talk points, which I think, Andy, you've kind of really put your finger on it, which is as we spend more time alone, some of them get bigger and bigger. And I think it's another thing to call out that when people are doing freelancing, it's really hard to separate their sense of identity from the work they do. When you're kind of a sole trader, you are your business and your business is you. So I think just really helping segment that in your mind. So, you know, if someone's turning down you as a freelancer, it doesn't mean that they're turning down you as a person. Or if there's a high demand for your work or a low demand for your work, it doesn't mean that that's an indication of your value as a person as well. So I think just some strategies with managing the stress, but it sounds like also some of the social anxiety about how people are going to perceive you and respond to you will be really important.
I think there's something in there as well, that the people that are so self-aware of this actually end up being the people who are so much more interesting to talk to, right? Because they have to think about how they're going to be interesting. And whereas the people that, you know, can just go, oh, I can do this however I like, end up talking all about themselves, probably aren't very good listeners, and not necessarily someone that you want to keep talking to long term. So, you know, sometimes, you know, that kind of introversion is your superpower and makes you so much more interesting when you actually do reach. Now, the next question, I was going to give you both a rest because I've actually got some resources ready lined up. So this next question is about, what are some tips to calculate quotes for jobs and where you sit with the market? Isolation of freelancing, lack of connection with other industry and designers makes it difficult to navigate this space. So I went and found actually a whole bunch of really good talks and people. So here are some links. I definitely recommend looking up Emily Cohen. Here in the links is a video with her and Chris Do. Chris Do does a lot of stuff on the future about knowing your worth, being able to charge and getting the right value for your work. We've interviewed Emily on the Never Not Creative podcast, so you can also go and listen to that if you just want to walk the dog and listen to, you know, the sages talk about how to make more money. And then really the sort of godfather of it all, Mike Montero, I've put his Creative Mornings talk up from quite a few years ago, but it still rings very, very true. And I think, you know, one of the things in this space is, you know, you have to understand what value you're bringing to your clients. And even I think I might let you jump in there, Nicky, because you mentioned, you sort of touched on earlier around value-based pricing even being something that, you know, this isn't just about the amount of time it takes and the hourly rate you want to achieve. It's actually about the worth that, you know, it delivers for your client.
Yeah, it's such a hard one because it's still such a conversation, but I think the Advertising Council has something on value-based pricing as well. Basically, it's really interesting. So the value, if you're a designer and you're creating a brand, that brand can have millions and billions of dollars of value over the next 20 to 30 years that you're paid, you know, maybe $8,000 to $10,000 for. So not that you ask for that, but it's how you value the output that you have and how you make sure that you're just being paid for the service as opposed to, well, that'll take me 3 days. Everything always takes twice as long as we always budget for, which is, again, that nature of the industry undercharging. The other thing is you can charge for an output. So be really clear on, I'm providing you X, Y, and Z, and that is at this cost. So that if they ask for more, that you're paying more. It's not, oh, well, we thought you'd do that anyway within the time. So being really clear on your outputs or the value that it provides to the business.
Cool. I've just also added in there's a podcast I did with Les, who also has written 2 books on this and does training as well around how to, you know, get paid what you're worth. Okay. Last question that's come in. So we've done really well to get through these. And this one actually came this morning, so you might not have even seen it, Erica. So I'll take my time reading it just so you have a little chance to get familiar with it. My manager is going through a lot of things in their personal life and is giving off negativity in our studio. The other day, the person was bagging our boss over the phone within earshot of our junior designer and other people who were also in the studio. The person has also gone into nasty mode with their critiques. For example, calling work portfolio images done years ago amateurish and looking like they were done by a student. Hearing that hurt me a lot because that was done by designers still working in the studio, me included. We got along quite well before, but I've distanced myself from this person because of the negativity and me being used as a sounding board. Not sure what to do because my manager is much older than me.
Yeah, I think, Andy, this one speaks to a lot of the tough ones we had before about just how hard this is to change as an individual and just how damaging some of those behaviours are for that sense of psychological safety within the team environment. So I think, firstly, just want to acknowledge, like, we all have our ups and downs, but it's not fair to bring this stuff to work. It's not professional. So I think we have to skirt a fine line between making it okay to bring your full self to work, but not doing that at the expense to other people. So I think how you manage that, I think would be really dependent on what your relationship is like with your manager. I think if you have quite a close relationship with the manager, it's something I'd probably call out really quietly in a safe place, because they might not realize that they are bringing as much stress to work as you're seeing. So I think it's a good opportunity to check in, to see if they're okay. So it could be a conversation like, hey, I've noticed you've been a bit stressed and snappy lately. Is everything okay? Is there anything, we can help with? If you're not really close, I think this is, again, something worth raising with appropriate people in your workplace. One, because of the impact it's having on the team and the morale, but two, because it sounds like this person actually is going through a pretty stressful time and they might actually need some support as well. So I think, really tricky power dynamics though, because you've got someone who's not only in a position of power, but someone who's not particularly happy either.
Yeah.
Nicky?
Well, you nailed that. No, I agree. I just think sometimes people need to be heard. So maybe if you just apply some, as hard as that is, some empathy and ask them if they're okay, and then use that as a subversive tactic to then say how that's making you feel. I think that's probably the best situation. But yeah, Erica nailed that.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? When before I do this, there's probably time for one more question. If anyone has one, you want to pop it in the questions tab. We could probably still do one more. As I wait for that to go in, I think it's really hard to sort of be human to someone when they're exhibiting such inhuman tendencies. But sometimes it really does break it down quite quickly, and it's a good thing to do. So if someone's behaving like that, it's quite good to be able to just go, hey, is everything okay? Because it's about them, and it's not necessarily about, you're affecting everybody else. It's like, are you okay? And so, there's a famous phrase, isn't it? But it's certainly worth doing. It's also worth doing. I know people who have done this with clients. So if sometimes clients are behaving erratically, you can actually go, look, are you okay? Is there something going on here? Because you really do want to kind of understand that, actually this might not be them. This might be a whole bunch of other pressures that's going on for them. So worth a look. Okay, so we do have a couple of things that have come in. Are there any tips and tricks you would give to a graphic design student who's only just starting out in the industry? I've started some freelance work and have been thinking a lot about where I want to take design in the future. Nicky.
How interesting. So you've intrigued me by just saying you're thinking a lot about where you want to take design. So I would reach out to interesting people that you follow or like their careers or workplaces, and just say that and start a conversation, and then see. I think it's about meeting people with different types of work environments and telling them what your point of view on design is and seeing what they say. And I think then you might either get a job that way because you've piqued their interest, or you might find out where you fit as well. So I think it's dual purposed, and again, it's that subtle networking.
Yeah, I would also write this stuff down. I'm equally intrigued. Publish it, start a blog,
Put
whatever.
it out there.
Is that old blog? I'm not meant to say blog, but I'm feeling very old recently.
TikTok.
TikTok it. But I think if you get that stuff out there, because it will be a point of difference. There's not many people coming into the industry talking about the future of design. I can tell you that. So, if you've got that and you're willing to kind of think about it hard, people are looking for new people who are questioning the status quo. I think it's such a great thing to hang your hat on. We've got one last question. We did get one into the tab. So I have a friend who is struggling to find a job in the design industry and feels her status as a returning mother looking for a part-time job and with experience and a qualification in graphic design is hindering her chances. What advice would you give? Nicky, do you want to go first?
Oh, yeah, I feel you. As a returning mother who's part-time, even with a, partnership and people who very much support me, it's really hard. And you do feel like you're providing less and a hindrance to everyone else yourself. And then it's a really, back to that kind of two-pronged guilt that you feel. It's tough because you don't want your career shouldn't take a back seat because of the fact that you've had a child. And we are lucky we're in a position now where I guess the industry is moving on a bit more, and it's a conversation around parental care as opposed to maternity care or mother, the women shouldn't take that drop in their career. I'm saying that part-time, if your current employer, and I don't remember, Andy, whether you had a current employer who won't take you back, but I think you're job hunting. Interesting to look for part-time work it's interesting to look for that. Ask recruiters. Again, I would look at contracting or freelancing. There's a lot of work there. You can set your terms. You can say, I only work 3 days a week. This is how long it will take, and this is how much I will get. I know it doesn't give you that fixed safety in case you want to get into a job and get maternity leave next time, but it might give you more of a sense of self-worth because they will really appreciate your skills. You obviously have experience and skills, and you'll be able to dictate your terms. However, as a new mum, you also want to go back to work to have culture and people, because you're probably sick of being stuck at home with the baby. And so if you do freelancing, see if you can go into their office, see if you can be part of their culture, be part of their team. Otherwise, I would talk to recruiters about freelance and contracting, especially creative recruiters. They are making new models and ways for people to work at the moment because the landscape is shifting and the need is shifting. So I would just put yourself out there and don't, again, you said before, it's like we inhibit ourselves because of our perception, and it's sometimes you think your worth has dropped because you're only offering 3 days, but you will end up working, providing the same solution, because we fuck around most of the time for the other 2 days anyway.
Well, I was chatting with someone yesterday who said, you have to realize that what you've been doing for the last, year or however long you took off is incredible time management, incredible organization, like stuff that, you're now probably more productive than anybody else in the industry coming back in because you understand how to prioritize. There's so many skills that you learned during that time. It is time to kind of use that as that's a weapon for coming back into the workforce versus others that, are just getting by. So I think that's worth remembering.
And I think, Nicky, that was really practical. Just one tiny flip is thinking about yourself as a designer who has kids rather than a mother who wants to design can sometimes be just a massive paradigm shift as well. I think sometimes we can change our sense of who we are once we have kids. And I think you're allowed to actually have multiple identities. You're allowed to be good at work and be, the parent you want to be as well. So I think just watch the narrative that you've got around being a working parent as well.
Excellent. What an amazing session. Thank you both so much. There are so many great bits of advice, experiences shared. Hopefully that's helped the people that sent the questions in. Thank you very much. You can always send these in at nevernotcreative.org. I'll also stick in our Discord channel here, which I think is... I think it's this. Hopefully it is. If it's not, someone click on it and tell me. If it's not, it's got a hype. There it is. It definitely is. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining in. You can jump in there. There's a channel on there called Asking for a Friend. And if you do have any other questions, there's a few of us on there that will be able to give some other perspectives as well. Don't forget to sign up for next month and spread the word if there's anybody else you think that could benefit from being able to ask questions like this in this environment. Thank you so much. You were both amazing. Hopefully we'll see you.
Apologies about my IT. The intern question, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm sorry that I didn't get to answer that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. We hardly noticed. It was seamless. Brilliant. Thank you very much. We'll end the session. See you all next month. Thank you.
Bye.